Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the first edition of The View from the Opposition for the 2023-24 campaign. Newcastle welcome Aston Villa to St James's Park on Saturday evening. And I'm joined by Dan Rolinson from Birmingham Live on the Claret and Blue Podcast. Got me words out there eventually. How are we doing, Dan? Thanks for popping on the podcast.
Yeah, all good, mate. Thank you very much for having me on. It's an exciting game, isn't it, this one? So happy to be here talking about it.
It is a very exciting game. I think it's going to be a brilliant game for the neutral. My first question to you, Dan, is what are you expecting from Villa on Saturday? What should our listeners expect from Villa?
I think there'll be a fast start. I think Emery will want to go there and kind of set the tempo, I guess, and put Newcastle to the sword. Sorry, I've gone with. I know you're probably going to ask me predictions later in the show, but I think Villa will sneak a win on Saturday. I've just got this funny feeling that. But people say when you kind of have the season fixtures come out, like who's a bad first game, and people go, Man City, United, whatever. I think Newcastle away is probably one of the toughest games that Villa could have asked for on the first day. I just wonder that when you play a good side, which Newcastle are, they maybe take a couple of games to get up to speed. So maybe you can hit them early in the first week or two of the season. And that might be a bit of a stupid prediction, but I feel like Man City maybe have been hit with the odd weird result every so often towards the start of a season. If I'm expecting Newcastle to be up around the top 6 next year and be a good side that kind of have to kick into gear and kind of work through the motions, maybe the first game of the season, that 5:30 kickoff is one where they'll be slightly rusty. Now, you could obviously say the same things for Villa as well if we're expecting them to be a good side, but I think Emery will have set the standards over pre-season to go there and say, look, if we go and beat Newcastle on Saturday, or even come away with a point, which would be very good, you have that belief and that confidence to say, well, if we can do that at Newcastle away, we can do that anywhere.
I think Eddie Howe has also set the standards over the summer, and what we've come to know of Eddie Howe is that his standards are sky high. Newcastle unbeaten in pre-season away as well, which is fantastic. And 2 good tests last weekend against Villa, Real and Fiorentina. And they're going into this full of confidence, I think. And I think it's all about setting the tone. They did it last season against Nottingham Forest at St James's Park, where there was a lot of expectation, and they won that game. I just think it's going to be a fantastic game. I think it's going to be really close. And I think this is a big, big test for Newcastle. I mean, you're talking about, from a Villa point of view, what game you didn't really want to start the season in theory about going up to the North East and facing Newcastle. Equally, I don't think if Eddie Howe could have had his pick, he would have picked Aston Villa because, as you said, Unai Emery has really worked hard this summer. He did a fantastic job in the season. You guys have done really well in the transfer market. And from a neutral's point of view, I think this game could be the game of the day, really, the game of the opening weekend. I think it's set up really nicely. In terms of Unai Emery, how will he set up Aston Villa? What will the approach be in terms of tactics and formation?
So we're seeing a bit of a change with Villa over this pre-season. Obviously, we knew last year that Villa would want to play out from the back and build through Martinez and through the centre halves and kind of have these repeatable actions of getting into the box in the same way. And if you watch Villa a lot, you will see them kind of create the same moves over and over, and with success a lot of the time as well. The signing of Pau Torres changes things a little bit. And I said in our season preview in the week, out of the 3 signings, Diaby, Tielemans and Torres is the one that creates the most question marks, which sounds bizarre because we all know he's a very good player, and I think come the end of the season we'll go, wow, like he was vastly important for Villa. But just at the moment, because Alex Moreno obviously played left back last season, he's out for the start of the season. So Pau Torres is playing kind of a left back at the moment because he's left-footed, and so is Tara Mings. We're all saying, well, they surely can't play together, because for some reason 2 left-footers can't play together, even though 2 right-footers, no one bats an eyelid at that. The Torres is playing off as a left back to a certain extent out of possession, with Mings in the centre, Konsa as the other centre half, and then Cash really pushing up on the right hand side. So when Villa do have possession and are building up from the back, Torres drops in to be a back 3. Torres, Mings, and Konsa as a 3. Cash is well up far on the right hand side, almost as a right winger. So you've then got the 3 at the back, 2 midfield, 3 forwards, and then the 2 strikers as well. So when Villa do have the ball, they can make these little triangles and spring from kind of nothing happening to being through on goal in a matter of seconds. And because they're so, like I said, these actions are repeatable, you get into those positions where Watkins is through behind or whatever, and you think, he'll score here. Whereas 12 months ago, because those opportunities were so rare, I think we were kind of criticising Watkins and some of the forward options as not scoring enough goals, but it's because they weren't in the positions often enough to kind of get up to speed almost. So Villa will play this kind of 4-4-2 almost out of possession with McGinn off the right, Buendia or Bailey off the left. It would have been Jacob Ramsey, but he's injured for the start as well. But it's not like 4-4-2 in the traditional sense of 4 midfielders, 2 wide men, and you just lump it forward to the short man and the big man up top. When Villa do have the ball, it's a 3-4-3, I guess, or 3-3-4 or something like that. I don't know. It's interesting. Whenever I watch Villa, it's just, I feel like I learn something new watching them. And I feel like it's fascinating to watch us go through the motions. I don't think kind of a set formation is a thing anymore for Villa. Go back to Dean Smith, and it was a 4-3-3. Grealish off the left, 3 in midfield. Steven Gerrard the same with the fullbacks bombing on. You kind of go, well, that's the system, and if that doesn't work, there's no real plan B. For Villa, it's like, well, we'll play out from the back. That'll be consistent. But besides that, who knows what could happen? And that's kind of exciting, and it's obviously difficult to defend against as well if you're the opponent.
Yeah, 100%. I think when I look at Villa, one of the things that still haunts me is that game against Newcastle at Villa Park, where Villa were deserved winners, and it was a one-off for Newcastle in many ways because they went on and they picked up form again. Of course, finished in the top 4, but we saw, I think, against Villa in the States, some of the same kind of traits. I know Newcastle played a different formation with the 3 at the back, and we most certainly will not see that on Saturday again. But what stood out was kind of the space that Villa managed to exploit against Newcastle in both those games, really. And I think the midfield battle is going to be key, but also Ollie Watkins, he seems to, or at least in that game against Newcastle Villa Park, he seemed to drift out wide. He got the better of Kieran Trippier on a couple of occasions, and obviously Villa ended up winning. Where do you see the key battles being?
I think down the Newcastle's left side, probably. Again, I don't want to be coming on a Newcastle podcast going, no, I'm not convinced by Newcastle, because that's not fair, because they're a good side. I think they'll be up and around that top 6 conversation all season, and it'll go 2 ways. They'll either finish in the Europa League, or they will have another great season and get into the Champions League again. I'm not massively convinced by the defence at the moment. I think if I was a Newcastle fan, I'd be after another signing or 2 to kind of at least bolster the options. We spoke a little bit in the reverse podcast that we did about Villa, that John McGinn playing off the right-hand side, kind of, and then dropping into a 10 position when Villa have possession. He can cause problems down that right flank, I think, along with Moussa Diaby, who will play off Ollie Watkins as the second striker. Having that raw pace is terrifying for a defender, and I said in a previous Villa show that we did that it's not even about just going, well, Moussa Diaby is quick, we need to be careful of that. It's just the threat of having a player with that pace. Like, okay, well, we need to be wary here, because one long ball over the top, and if he's in behind, that's it, it's game over. And this isn't a 2008 Gabby Bonahor situation where he's a pace merchant and that's all he's good at. No disrespect to Gabby if he ends up watching this. But Moussa Diaby is a finisher as well. His finishing is absolutely lethal, and that combination of pacing behind, and if he does get there, he will know how to finish as well. So I think McGinn and Diaby linking up off that right-hand side and targeting either Dan Burn at left-back or Matty Targett. If we're talking about Newcastle being a Champions League side, I'd expect again, maybe I'm being disrespectful here, I'd expect a better quality of player than those 2 names I've just mentioned to be my starting left-back choices for the season. Is that fair from your side of things, or am I underestimating how good they've been for you?
Yeah, I think you're underestimating how good Dan Burn has been. Dan Burn was fantastic. Okay. He was a surprise package last season. And yeah, on paper, he looks the weak point. But actually, towards the end of last season, I felt players and teams were targeting the other side. They were targeting Kieran Trippier as the weak point, because Dan Burn, every time you think he's going to get beaten for pace, those big long legs just seem to go into over drive and stop. I mean, like Saka and Co couldn't get the better of him. He's done really well. I think he will start against Villa. Yes, many people's priorities would be a left back. I still think it is. Kieran Tierney's been linked, but Newcastle needed to fill other positions. The centre mid. They've signed Tino Livramento. They've obviously gone out and got Harvey Barnes to replace Alan St-Maximin, which is a fantastic signing because he just adds goals to Newcastle. Yeah, I don't think many people would disagree. A left back would be an ideal addition, but it's just how much money Newcastle got left to spend, and obviously the window is, closing very, very soon. I think.
Sorry to interrupt. I know that this might not come into effect from this game, but does Livramento start, do you think? I know you spent a decent amount of money on him. Does he start right back and Trippier left back? Does that solve the problem?
There's been talk about that, but I just don't see it. I can't see that. He's
left back for England, hasn't he, Trippier?
He has. But I think what you get from Kieran Trippier when he's behind Miguel Almiron will be worth more. I don't think Harvey Barnes needs that kind of tuition. I think Harvey Barnes does what Harvey Barnes does. He's with all due respect to Miguel Almiron, he's a cleverer footballer. He knows what he needs to be doing. Whereas I think Kieran Trippier behind Almiron, he's a guiding hand. And then also you've got Bruno kind of edging over that way as well. And I think that right side works really well. You remove Trippier from that, you shift him over to the left and you put a young lad in like Livramento who's going to be a big star. I don't think you'll see Almiron, find the form he did at the start of last season. I was going to say, actually, you talk about the pace of Diaby and Watkins. I mean, Sven Botman's got a bit of pace about him, so it's going to be really interesting to see who he lines up against. The other big question is Fabian Schär going to be fit? Now, he's still got a few errors in him. Sometimes he does really worry me, especially when he's up against a pacey striker. So it's going to be interesting to see if he is past fit. And if not, who starts? Will it be Jamal Lascelles or a young lad called Alex Murphy? Big decision for Eddie Howe. He did say Schär was nearing at least a return to training. So that's one to watch. But also you were talking about kind of the options that Villa have. You're talking about Diaby and you were talking about Watkins, how if they get in front of goal, it's good night. They will finish. I think our listeners and viewers will be hearing this and saying, well, you could say the same about Newcastle. And I think it paints a really good picture about where both sides are, that if I ask you for a key man, you could give me 5 or 6. If I ask you for a strength, you would probably, again, give me several strengths of Villa. And it's just really nice to be able to sit here and say these two teams, they're going to be around the top 6 for a long time to come with two great managers, really clever in the window, really good players, really good squad, entertaining to watch as well. I'm all for it. I'm all for upsetting the established order in the Premier League.
Yeah, me too, because I'm sick of the traditional top 6 and the bias that comes from the media. That I think there was something the other day, I think it was possibly Sky, and it was like the big sevens transfer window, and like Chelsea and Spurs were in it. Like Liverpool, Villa and Brighton finished in the top 7 last year, and they were nowhere near the discussion because the traditional top 7 is Chelsea, Spurs, Arsenal, Liverpool, City, United. One more, possibly. I can't remember. I think I was 7 then. I might just miscounting on my fingers. But I'm bored of that. And I think a lot of fans of the Premier League are as well, that unless you're one of those clubs' fans, of course, if you're not part of that, you want more representation in the mainstream media and you want your side to be respected. I don't want to have a great season and I know this isn't the be all and end all. I don't want my match of the day analysis to be 1 minute and it just be that the opposition played poorly. I want to start getting credit for Villa being a very good side, as I'm sure you will with Newcastle as well. And as long as us two sides, Brighton, Brentford, sides like that can come in and upset the establishment of the traditional top 6, top 7, top 8, whatever it ends up becoming to suit the narrative, I'm all for that because I'm just fed up of the bias towards those big sides.
Yeah, and I think
Chelsea finished 12th last season.
I know. Don't even get it started.
I think it's that. Was it 40 odd points? Like, why are they anywhere even near this conversation? Yes, they could be much better with Pochettino, but to just say, well, they're a big 6 side, they weren't even in the top half last year. Like, give it a rest.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? And I think the fact that both sides, Villa and Newcastle, are looking to upset that so-called top 6. It's killed off the rivalry that was there. The Sog on the Time banner, and I mean that rivalry. And I'll be honest, it didn't leave me for a very long time, but it's died off in the last season or so because I think both fans would like to see either side actually be ahead of the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea and the rest of them. And it is quite interesting to see that rivalry has died off.
Yeah, we had Aaron on the podcast last year. I think it was before the 3-0, actually. I think it was the preview show for the 3-0 at Villa Park. And we were talking about how good a job both sides had done. And we spoke a little about the rivalry between the two sides. And it felt like a faux rivalry. It felt like a faux rivalry. Oh, Christ. It felt like a faux rivalry to me anyway, that it was just that there was two good sides in the Championship at the time. There's the whole Steve Bruce thing after the fact that he was our manager, then he was yours, and the bits between the two fans over the years when we relegated you on the final day, that could have been anybody in that situation. It wasn't an anti-Newcastle thing. It was just we're going to poke fun at the opposition that could go down today. And even that was what, 15 years ago or something off the top of my head. Like, it's time to let go, guys, isn't it, at some stage? So I was never really particularly bothered about Newcastle. I don't care enough to go, oh yeah, I don't like Newcastle because of this thing that was supposed to be a rivalry. So to now to have this almost mutual appreciation that, yeah, they're one of the guys that's going to help us rock this top six. I quite like that now.
Yeah, I was totally the opposite to you. It stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah, I think Newcastle fans were more annoyed about it than Villa fans ever were annoyed about any retaliation from Newcastle.
Yeah, well, my father-in-law is a Villa fan, and I
Okay.
had to explain to him why I wasn't too happy with Villa, and he, like you, couldn't quite understand it. But yeah, but I'm over it now. I'm past it.
Good.
I'm past it.
Good.
In terms of the way Newcastle play, they're likely to play a really high press. They will try and catch Villa out. You said that, you know, Villa will try and play out from the back. That might play into Newcastle's hands because the way Eddie Howe sets up his team, you know, the best form of defense is from attack. You know, if it's Callum Wilson, Isaac, whoever it might be, Miguel Almiron, they're really good at getting in the faces of the defense and the goalkeeper. How will Villa handle that?
Well, I'm hoping, but that would be maybe blind faith at this stage. I like what Emery's done with the side and playing out from the back, and we were very good at it last season. But obviously, Pau Torres has come in new over the summer and will start. I'm 99% certain of that. So that just disrupts that back line of what it was good at last season. If it was exactly the same side, I know this sounds mad. If it's exactly the same side that finished last season, I'll be more confident because I know they can already do it together. But Torres comes in, Ramsey won't be playing because he's injured. Obviously, Moreno won't be playing because he's injured, and Torres replaces him. So there's two players down that left-hand side that won't be there now. So that's a big change and a big kind of structural impact. As much as I was saying at the beginning that maybe Villa can go to St James's and catch Newcastle cold, that's the one thing I'm wary of from Villa, that maybe we're cold as well. That playing out from the back won't have the same kind of rhythm that it did last season, just because the personnel is different. Now, Pau Torres is a very good footballer, very good at playing out from the back, so he should be able to just come in. He knows Emery and just be able to do it from the off. But the thought of going to Newcastle in front of 50,000 and his first kind of game in the Premier League, if he misplaces a couple of early passes and Newcastle break behind and score, you kind of go, oh dear, like what's happening here? But yeah, I think that's the one thing where Villa are probably susceptible to high line that we play. If, like we said about Villa playing down the right-hand side with a long ball over the top of whoever and pace from Diaby and linking up with McGinn, the very same thing could happen to Villa with Villa's high line gets caught out, as it did in the pre-season games as well. I don't know if it was specifically in the Newcastle game, but we'd certainly got caught out once or twice in the others. That would be the thing for me. I think as much as I'm saying Villa will go there and maybe get something, I think there'll be goals. I think both sides, because they're not yet up to speed with new signing things, I think both sides will concede. So I will go for a Villa win, but I think it could be a 2-1, 3-2 kind of situation.
Yeah, I'm going to go for 2-2. I think it'll be a draw. I think it'll be really close.
I'll take that, by the way. I'd absolutely take a draw.
Yeah. I think so with Newcastle fans. I think Eddie Howe obviously would be loving to start the season with 3 points, given that Newcastle have got quite a tough start to things. And of course, you want to set the tone in front of your own fans. Is there, just a couple more questions, who is I mean, we've mentioned so many players, Dan, from that point of view, but is there one player in particular you think Eddie Howe will have printed off, he'll stuck to his office wall and he'd gone, right, guys, this is the guy we have to keep quiet?
It's great because I love the fact that this could easily be an answer where there's 5 or 6 players for it.
Just the full squad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, you know, they do like a team photo and they're like sat on the benches. Just put that up because that's what you should be scared of. If you go back 2 or 3 seasons, it's a picture of Jack Grealish, isn't it? And not much else. We had good players around him, but he was the man.
Yeah, like Alan St-Maximin, isn't it? You know, that's the case in point. Yeah,
kind of not having much of a system, but he's the guy who's
give it to him and see what happens. Yeah,
yeah, exactly that. Both sets of fans here will be familiar with how things have gone with each team's side over the last few years. So it would have been Grealish 100%. It's so difficult. So I've gone with Diaby as being my player of the year this season, which is a bold shout for a new signing, because as much as I'm kind of like criticising Pau Torres for being a new signing, maybe not being able to fit in straight away, I'm going, yeah, Diaby will score millions of goals and be player of the year. So I'll pick somebody from last year to have a continuation of a good season and say Douglas Luiz, who I think is probably our best footballer. So he might not be the most important in a certain system, although he probably is. I think Kamara is very important to the way we play. Obviously, Watkins and Diaby up front with the pace they'll have, they'll be the guys scoring the majority of the goals. They'll be very important. Emi Martinez is one of the best goalkeepers in the league, if not the world. And I think he's massively important. Without him, we'd struggle to get into the top half. I think he's that important to us. But Douglas Luiz, he just keeps things ticking. He's everywhere. He's so good technically that I think I've gone with him as my most assists this season. And we said in our season preview that some players will get assists just because they play the final ball before a good move or a good run and they technically get it, but it doesn't really mean anything. Douglas Luiz is the one threading a pass or finding that reverse ball or something that's very clever. And that's what he is. He's an intelligent, clever footballer and technically very, very good. So I think if Villa are to have a good season, as much as there's 5 or 6 players that if they weren't there, obviously they would struggle because you could say that for everybody. I think Douglas Luiz is possibly one of the first names on the team sheet.
Yeah, battle of Brazilians, isn't it, as well on Saturday with Bruno and Jolinson.
The pre-season game, Douglas Luiz was very good out of the two. I think John said that there was 2 Brazilians playing and the Villa one was much superior than Newcastle's. But that was only pre-season.
I mean, I'm assuming, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it was probably Bruno that played that. Bruno's been a little bit off the pace during pre-season, so there has to be hope that he can reach the levels that he did last year. Just finally then, are you worried about one particular Newcastle player?
That's a great question, actually. I've not really given Newcastle's squad that much thought, which probably sounds mad, seeing as we're about to play them in 2 days' time. Isak is probably the one. I think if not for, obviously when he signed, he probably looked at that and thought he could have gone somewhere better than Newcastle because Newcastle have improved so drastically and they're now a Champions League club. That obviously makes a lot of sense still. But you would still say that he, on his day, could be a level above even where Newcastle want to be. I don't know if that's too harsh on Newcastle, but he looks like, maybe not right away, he could be this kind of world-class talent. So probably him. Is there anyone else that I should be thinking of? Obviously, Guimaraes is a great player. Some of the defenders you mentioned earlier are decent players as well. Harvey Barnes, I do like. I would have quite liked him to sign for Villa, to be honest. I think we're possibly a little bit light out on that left-hand side. I think Bailey will probably play off the left this weekend, and I'm not hugely convinced of him. So I think Harvey Barnes would have been an upgrade in that position for us. And 35 million, was it? Something like that?
Yeah.
So I think, again, he could have a good impact, but Isak is probably the one, I think.
What's really interesting is that Harvey Barnes isn't guaranteed to start because Anthony Gordon's had a really good pre-season. Yeah. I think Miguel Almiron, I've backed him to find form again. I think he'll have a really good season. So he's maybe one to watch. And Elliot Anderson as well.
I would say Almiron probably goes a little bit under the radar still. That just because he didn't have a great start, people who maybe don't watch him all the time go, well, he's not really that dangerous. He'll score 5 or 6 decent goals a season, but is he really that good? I think he
didn't even do that. That was the issue. Like, he didn't even do that to begin with. He scored 1 goal the season before last, and then he's hit, I think it was 11 last season. But you are right. I mean, the issue is that when Newcastle under Steve Bruce or Rafa Benitez would score goals, they would usually be on the counter, and all you would see would be that last pass before the striker, back of the net, and he would get, Almiron doesn't do anything. But if you rewound the goals back to where it started, it would be Almiron carrying the ball from Newcastle's own box and setting up the attack for what was to come. But Match of the Day never rewinds that far back, or Danny Murphy never sees the full setup. And yeah, he used to get a lot of grief, but look, he's scoring goals now, and I think it's a big season for him because Newcastle, like Diaby, lots of fans wanted another right winger to come in and rival Almiron, potentially replace him. Eddie Howe hasn't. Doesn't look like he will do. Almiron's pretty much guaranteed to start, but I think he has to find the form that he did last season, especially in the first half of it, to guarantee his long-term future. Otherwise, he'd be like Anson Maximin, potentially out of the door. But yeah, it's exciting. Like Villa, you could name. I could give you several players who will be very good this season for Newcastle United, and it's just lovely to be in a position to be able to say that. It's really exciting. And like I said at the start, this is a great game for the neutrals. It really is. Just remind us then of your prediction for Saturday.
Oh, we say it's a great game for the neutrals, so it's got 0-0 written all over it, hasn't it now? I think there'll be goals, so I will stick with what I said in my own podcast and say 2-1 Villa. Yeah, I'd be the only thing that would scare me a little bit is if we go behind. Just because of how good the atmosphere, especially if it was early on as well. If Newcastle go ahead early on and it's, like I said, a high ball over the back or something and we get caught out, I'll be thinking, okay, we might be in for a tough afternoon here. And I think if we did concede first, I don't think we would go on to win, because that's not a very Villa thing to do, even under Emery. So I'll stick with a 2-1 win. I think there'll be goals. I think it will be exciting, and Villa will just edge it in the end.
I'm going to go for 2-2, and I'm also going to throw in, I don't usually do this, but I think Miguel Almiron and Isaac with the goals. But yeah, 2-2, I think it'll be entertaining, it'll be close, and it's a decent point, I think, for both sides to start the season off, indeed. So yeah, I think
Villa have lost the opening game for the last couple of years, so anything better than that is a good start for us.
Ends of the run, doesn't it? But yeah, I think it's going to be it's set up to be a really good game. Dan, thank you very much for providing the insight into Aston Villa. To you guys watching, please give the channel, hit that subscribe button and hit the thumbs up as well. And if you're listening on our podcast, please leave us a rating and review. And head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news.